Hi, everyone. My name is Brendan Hughes, and I'm delighted to be your host today for our first episode of Intent Decoded. And the topic is why most GTM teams are misusing intent data. I'm delighted to be joined by two experts in the topic, both coming from different angles. So Nick Bennett has spent 15 years working inside of companies in B2B marketing. Now currently works with 35 plus companies, helping them with B2B marketing. He's written the book on B2B influencer marketing. And he's not just written the book, but he's done it because he's built a pipeline of at least 6 million USDs in pipeline via LinkedIn organic with a conversion rate of 60%. I suspect that number is updated since I last read it, Nick. So it's great to have you on board. And we're also joined by fellow Irishman Niall O'Gorman, who is formerly of Mondelez, co-founder previously of Channel Site, and now founder of a company called Market Sizer. And Niall is deep in the topic of purchase intent, obsesses about it from a product and a customer perspective, kind of on a daily basis. So you're very welcome, Niall, to Intent Decoded. I'm going to start with, nice to have you both here. Nick, I'm going to start with you because you prompted us a few weeks back when we reached out and started having a conversation with you. And you used the phrase, stop pouring lighter fluid on a dead pipeline. And you felt that people were misusing intent data, kind of just getting it all wrong, using it at the wrong time in the buyer cycle. So would you unravel that a little bit for us? Maybe start with telling us what you understand by intent data. What is intent data for you? Kind of where do you get it? What do you use? What's good or bad about it? And then we might then dig into when's the right time to use it. But if you can start by telling us, what prompted you to maybe write that post?
Yeah, it's interesting because here's a scenario that plays out constantly. So again, I'm sure everyone that's listening, everyone has gone through this at some point. So a RevOps team buys an intent data platform. I've bought intent data platforms over the years, and they're not cheap, to be honest with you. Marketing gets excited. They pull a list of accounts. It's spiking on relevant topics. They hand it to sales as a priority list. Sales works the list. Conversion's flat. Everyone blames the data. But the real issue is that half of those accounts had zero prior engagement, no ICP fit validation, no existing relationship. So if you think about it, intent data on a cold account with no groundwork laid is just a reason to send a bad cold email faster. If you really think about it, the platform didn't fail. The team skipped the foundation. And I work with a lot of teams today, and I talk to a lot of people. The foundational stuff, people just want to skip it because they think hey, listen, let's just cut corners. We got to get there quicker. We got to do more with less. If we skip some of the foundational stuff, maybe we can just get there quicker. But all you're doing is just creating more bad habits at the end of the day. So where intent data actually works is when it layers on top of existing account context. So an account in your CRM that's kind of been in a nurture sequence, it's visited your pricing page twice. Now it spikes on a competitor comparison keyword. That's a legitimate trigger. That's the account that you want to move on. The signal confirms what the other data was already suggesting. But again, you have to have the foundational pieces in play first.
And Nick, would you say that cheap money being available from VC for a lot of SaaS companies over the last number of years has been part of a negative contributor to this whole exercise? So those kind of spam cannons and cold email and all the buzzwords that fly around, a lot of that has been enabled by it being super cheap to blast out millions of emails. So if people had to pay more attention to the unit economics of doing all of this, then maybe organically it would be partially solved.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I agree with that for sure. I think the other issue is that, let's be honest, the economy, at least in the US, is not great. And, we see layoffs happening every day. So you have people in marketing that are doing the job of 3 other people. Let's call it like it is. People are burnt out. I don't know how many people are really trying to give 100%. They're just trying to get through the end of the day. So what used to be years ago, someone that would put something really solid in play, they're just trying to get it done at the end of the day as quick as possible because they have a million other things to do. So I think it all contributes to it.
Yeah, so interesting you raise that. So like I've half my career in large multinationals, half my career in kind of startups and scale-ups, and the pace is just astoundingly different. So when I was working in Mondelez, based in Zurich, as an example, within the coffee team, it would take weeks, months to plan out a campaign. You'd have lots of agency involvement, loads of resources, loads of support, loads of time to prep, etc. But all that time and all that support keeps on getting compressed with each layer of there's no, the budget is being reduced, or an agency is not available, or you have more roles that you're responsible for. So I agree with you. People are getting burnt out and struggling, and they then lean into what's the quickest fix, and the quickest fix is obviously AI support and get onto ChatGPT or Claude. And if it kind of sounds good, looks good, let's run with it, because I'm so tired from all the balls I'm juggling throughout the day for the rest of the 3 roles that I'm responsible for.
Niall, can we unravel maybe with you, because you've been digging into intent, and I want to link in Nick on this as well. So, like, what are all, just for the audience, what are all the different types of intent that you're seeing kind of swirling around in the ether at the moment? So, and then AI is picking up signals as well. But talk to us about the kind of different ways people can think about intent.
Yeah, so I think people would fiercely argue over what is the definition of intent in the first place and what it maps onto. But if we go to just a high level, if somebody is going to your website and visiting a pricing page, clearly there's some level of interest there. They're looking at pricing for a reason. Means if they're looking at the pricing, they probably have some awareness of your product up front and have done some kind of investigation or read reviews, things like that. People who are browsing on review sites like G2 is one of the most popular ones, where people are going and reading reviews about products up there, and the different comparisons between different SaaS solutions, and all of that data is available to purchase. And obviously, SaaS companies can get in there and sponsor things and distort the view of what's being presented back to the user. So there's a lot of arguments, whether it's the Gartner Magic Quadrant or it's G2 reviews or similar sites, as to how balanced or unbiased those views are. But intent is essentially anybody taking an action, whether it's reading a piece of content, turning up at an event, requesting some information, filling out a form. It's all these signals, very like a relationship, as to somebody showing kind of initial and ongoing sustained intent, which you're trying to convert into a transaction, whether that's purchasing something, repurchasing something, expanding something. But we also have to think that a consumer transaction and intent is very different to what's happening within a large organization. A consumer may decide on impulse, I want a Snickers, I want a chocolate bar, I'm just going to go get it right now at the convenience store. But if somebody's going to invest 2 billion into a SAP transformation project in a very large company like Procter & Gamble, that's not happening on impulse. There's many people involved across multiple teams, and it's going to take months, if not years. So trying to measure and define what purchase intent means between a consumer transaction or a kind of B2B transaction, small, medium, or large, versus an enterprise transaction, there's going to be lots of different interpretations of that. But I suppose if we take it back to the SaaS landscape and where we all operate, then it's going to be anything where somebody is, turning up at an event like this to consume the content. They're, filling out a form, they're visiting the website, they're looking at pricing, they're revisiting pricing, and it's how you can join all those dots together at an individual level or persona, and then bubble that up to the account score, and not solely depend on a generic account score as to whether somebody is showing purchase intent. And I suppose we'd also include the kind of firmographic and technographic data. So our area of focus, we're trying to pick up signals at subscription level. So we're trying to track, is somebody on a trial, or are they converted to an active subscription? Are they loyal? Have they just joined? Are they price sensitive? When do we predict they're going to have a renewal? So there's loads of different factors, and it's all contextual to what's being purchased by who. And I suppose the value.
Yeah. So great point, Niall. I think, Nick, do you have a favorite formula of intent signals? Like in all the companies you've worked with, Niall's mentioned a bunch of different signals. No one probably in isolation is the answer, but is there some data points that you works or has worked for you?
I'd say there's two across two different teams that I rely on a regular basis. So there's the ABM side of it, and then there's the field marketing and event side of it. So like when I think of the ABM side, it's the most natural fit. intent data should be one of the 3 inputs on account selection. So fit, engagement, intent. If an account score is high on all 3, that's where you run a coordinated play, not just an email sequence. Sales and marketing are moving on the same account at the same time with the same messaging built around what signals is actually suggesting happening in the account. So what I see instead is ABM teams are using intent to build bigger lists, not tighter ones. I see that a lot, actually. So like, they're like, all right, great. We have intent. We have all these cool tools. Like, we should be building bigger lists so we can scale it, but it's not the right way. So if you flip that around and say, like, how do I use intent to build a tighter list for ABM? Because let's be honest, like ABM, you should really be only going after, 25 to say 50 accounts. Like, you shouldn't be going after. I had a CMO a couple weeks ago say, all right, I want to do ABM. We have 2,000 accounts that we're going after. I said, hold on, you're not doing ABM. You're doing targeted marketing at this point. So that's one aspect. I think on the field marketing side, they're underusing it completely. So like, if you think about this, and I've run a lot of like executive dinners or regional events, intent signals should be informing who gets an invite. I don't think many teams are actually running this play at all. So whoever's listening, please someone do this. It's not just who fits the ICP, it's who's actively showing signs of pain or pressure right now. So an account spiking on the topics relevant to your product 3 weeks before your event is an account worth getting in the room. But what I see instead for the people that are maybe using intent with events is like they're using invite lists built off of CRM filters and rep suggestions, but there's no signal layer kind of like underneath all of that. So really, honestly, I wish more people would use it. I use it for like the field marketing and event side of it, but I talked to a lot of people that are like, no, didn't even think about using it for that. So
yeah.
So what about, if you take that and you go too narrow, then you end up with a lot of people who are like-minded at these events, and you don't have that, I suppose, that, serendipity and friction, which tends to lead to great discussion and why people turn up at all these, events. So one is to kind of hear what other people in a similar situation, what they're experiencing, but also to, I suppose, listen to kind of thought-provoking and challenging discussions. And half of it's going, I don't feel alone anymore because everybody's in the same situation, has the same problems. But also if they're to kind of find a solution, that's coming through a debate, different polarized perspectives sometimes. Because nobody wants to turn up where everybody 100% agrees with the topic, because it's going to be very boring after an hour if you're not learning something new.
True, or you'll be like in an echo chamber like LinkedIn at the end of the day too. So.
Yeah. Well, speaking of which, you have written a lot about, I suppose the whole thing about individuals and personality, and kind of LinkedIn and other platforms being used as a kind of an engine to drive that initial kind of engagement and awareness, and I suppose creating a bit of a relationship by people subscribing to content and engaging with you directly. But things like that, where, let's face it, we've all seen over the last couple of years where LinkedIn has inherited the really negative traits of Twitter, and where it's kind of, you have to be really polarized and argumentative to get through the algorithm. What happens next? Because I talk to a lot of people and they've essentially switched off on LinkedIn, and they're going to Reddit, or they're going to Discord, or they're going to actually trying to go to physical events and engage with actual humans and have conversations. So what do you do in an environment where the platform is working against you, even if you know that it's the wrong thing to do, but it's what's going to get the impressions, it's what's going to spike people's interests, which I agree, it's like a shouty echo chamber at the moment.
I mean, it's tough because it's like you still have to show up. Honestly, I'm waiting for someone to build the next LinkedIn, because I will be the first user of whatever that platform is. But like, for me, I've stopped caring about impressions, like who's my content reaching. I know I've been creating content there for 6 years. Like, I know my content will reach the right people if I want it to. The biggest things for me are people saving my content, and are people sending my content to other like peers, colleagues, whatever. Like, those are the 2 indicators or signals, which again, great intent to know that my content is working. So like I think it was yesterday or the day before, I posted about, you hired a marketing leader for like the first time. You basically set them up for failure. Here's why. And in 24 hours, I think it had over 100 saves on it. It was sent like 30 or 40 times. So like, I know that struck a chord with people. And when I talk about ABM or field marketing, like I can tell which content is resonating based on like those two signals alone. I don't look at impressions. Like my content, I get like 1,000 impressions on my stuff nowadays. I used to be able to write content in a monthly basis. I would get 1 million impressions per month. Now I'm lucky to get about 100,000. It's a 10x reduction, which is crazy. But like, again, I've stopped caring about like impressions at the end of the day, likes, all of that. I just care about who's DMing me, who's saving it, and who's sending it.
I think that's a great, just goes back to your earlier point about volume versus kind of the quality or value kind of further down the pipeline. I know we have a stat that we cite, which is like 85% of people, before they reach out to you as a vendor, they've already kind of mostly finished their purchase journey, right? Or their decision-making process. It goes back to maybe your earlier point, Nick, which is like, if you're using intent data to build a list, you're starting in the wrong place. You're using it to narrowly qualify. Niall, can I ask, in your experiences, like when is the best time, or when have you seen intent data being used like really smartly? Like when have you seen it that actually it's delivering value for teams internally?
Sure. So I think like if we think the whole reason that market sizer exists and what we got into this this whole domain is that when I was back at Channel Site, one of the biggest challenges we had was we can create big lists and we can go after those lists either through email campaigns, inviting them to events, and as you said, Nick, that that's not going to be very successful if you're not getting the timing right and the context right down to the individual. Because if you want to hit a large organization like a Pampers brand within Procter and Gamble, then you're hitting potentially thousands of people. They've all got different roles and responsibilities. So even if you're hitting the right department, you've still got lots and lots of people who may or may not care less about the topic that you're sending out. So definitely, if you're able to pick up on signals which are indicating they've been interacting with content, or they've been interacting with people at your company, or interacting or connected to other people from competitors, or been to competitors' events, or interacting with competitors' content, those are things that you can kind of narrow the field. But you still, within that list, need to figure out where are they specifically at, whether that's company as a whole, have they previously purchased a product like yours? Is there any evidence through the kind of technographic or any other kind of case studies on vendor websites, things like that? Any evidence of them going to events? So all these executive dinners that are pushed up on LinkedIn, that's a great hit list, because that somebody's very passionate about a topic and very engaged if they've physically taken the time to turn up. And it tends to be the kind of C-level leadership and the kind of the buyers and the people who can influence a deal that do. So taking back to Nick's point, on one side, it's about generating a list which is broadly targeted on who makes sense. Then within that, you're trying to find out, well, where are they potentially within that kind of purchasing cycle? So if you can pull in data which is indicating they've previously had a solution like this, they currently have a solution like this, or they've got all the components which would suggest that they're ready for a solution like this, well, then just at an org level, you're going to get the timing better. And then within that, if you can find evidence that they have been interacting in conversations on Reddit or Discord, that they've been engaging with content on the likes of G2 or the Magic Quadrant content from the likes of Gartner, then those are things which again are going to give you a great indication. But then you have to layer that into, have they been to your website? Have they filled out a form? Have they ever previously spoken to one of your people? Even if they've said no and hung up the phone, there was still a point of interaction which maybe didn't work out and get the result you were looking for, but it's something that you can build on. So I think one of the great things about AI and all the systems and all the data that's available at our fingertips now, there's never been a better time to be able to give contextual relevance and timing relevance to the SDR or the AE, whether they're human or digital, that are reaching out on your behalf. And the days of spray and pray are gone. Like nobody, like I'm not opening any email that hits my inbox that hasn't been caught by the spam cannon or the spam filter. I'm not opening it. I'm just literally blocking everybody straight away. So it's like whack-a-mole in your inbox. Yeah. So how do you break through? And people are using they're going back to basics. They're doing things that don't scale. They're sending cakes over to people's offices. They're doing quirky things that maybe don't scale enough themselves, but then get massive engagement when it gets to LinkedIn or gets to a platform where people go, wow, that was amazing. You sent strawberry cakes all over San Francisco to people you're trying to prospect. It's not about they sent 20 cakes. It's about how many impressions do they get off the storytelling of, and this is what we're going to do to try and break through. This is how we activated. These were the results. And there's a bit of fun and engagement there, but those kind of things are cutting through. So I think one of the key tenets and the red thread that goes back to something that Nick's passionate about is that people are buying from people. It's all about relationships, whether that's a one-to-one individual, that's to a company and many individuals. And I suppose my question to Nick would be, how now that more and more interaction and discovery and reach out is happening from an agentic place, so it could be an AI SDR, an AI SE, or a procurement bot going out doing research and discovery. How do you deal with that? Because on one end of the spectrum, as you've talked about many times, it's not about NQLs and capturing leads and spray and pray. It's about relationships and building trust, and people buy from people. But how does that evolve, or where do you think it goes now that more and more of those interactions are actually happening by bots?
Yeah, I mean, well, first off, I love like the gifting stuff. So I was in the gifting space for a while. I work with ReachDesk now, UK-based company, and I'm a big believer of like doing things that don't scale around the gifting aspect of it. So huge believer of that, absolutely. Now going back to like kind of what you said. So like if I think about, because this goes back to like the MQL piece of it, and so like I think like the MQL conversation was already broken before AI. Like before this whole agentic piece that came out, like a form fill never told you anything reliable about where someone was in the buying process. But now that every team has access to like agentic tools, all these bots, all of this, like that can generate outreach at scale, the problem compounds. So volume is infinite. Differentiation collapses though. The only thing that actually separates your outreach from everyone else is whether you know what the people inside that account are doing right now. Not the account, the people. Are they researching? Who specifically? What are they consuming? What changed in the last 30 days? That's where intent data needs to go. Not this account spiked on a keyword, but these 3 people in this account are behaving in a way that tells us something real is happening. That's the signal worth acting on. Everything else is just noise with better copy. So it's like, how do you double down on the behavioral aspect of it? I think that's where like behavioral signals, they're becoming even more important because volume's no longer a differentiator.
And on that front, if you think of like all the great work that platforms like Common Room and other kind of signal aggregators are pulling together, initially it was just pulling all these disparate sources together in order to make sure that you've got one holistic place to go and you got access to all your signals, whatever type signals they are. But that also generates a lot of noise, because then what do you focus on? You got infinite feeds on your screen giving you lots of telemetry, but as a human, we zone out because we get overwhelmed. So what, I suppose, strategies, what tools, what platforms have you been using or your clients have been using recently, which you feel are actually helping to solve for that challenge? Because it doesn't feel like it's a shortage of signals anymore. It feels like, how do we figure out to focus on the right signals, and how can technology that's out there enable us to do that, as a one-to-one human, but also at scale when you're trying to run, marketing campaigns or, outbound sales campaigns.
Yeah. So I was watching a webinar yesterday from the people at Influ2. They seem to like be, I think contact level data is doing some pretty interesting stuff. I think the person level signal layer. So like you said, this is where Common Room lives, kind of like what you were talking about. Like it unifies the web activity, all of that. I think the issue is like you have to like you like 6 Sense, Bombora, like all those companies, they work at the account level by default, which is the problem. Like they tell you the accounts in market, they don't tell you who in the account is driving it, and that's where the gap. Like most teams lose the thread. So like the buying group problem is like, let's say Forrester puts the average B2B buying groups. I think they just had their conference like 2 weeks ago or something like that. The B2B buying group at 13 stakeholders now. So if your intent data is only surfacing the account, you're missing who's actually doing the research. So like the play that you built around in your ABM work, like basically coordinating touch points across the buying group, it's not doing anything for you. So like intent data should be helping you identify who's in the account, who's active, so sales and marketing can actually map that out. You know, I don't know. I don't use Clay. A lot of people love Clay. I know you can get some stuff from the enrichment level aspect of it. Like I said, I know like there's like the Influ2 piece of it that's doing some interesting stuff. I think it's more of just figuring out like the foundational aspect of like, how do you actually, like what signals should you be looking at versus like what signals were you looking at 6 months ago?
Yeah, when you're, because I know we look over an SDR or an AE shoulder and they essentially have an AI tool in front of them and they're ideally trying to plug in data sources, signal sources. In your marketing world, Nick, if we go one step kind of back on that, so how is AI like helping you with this, or is it already too late? You know, it just doesn't help you with finding with demand gen or lead gen, right, further up the funnel. So what's going on for you there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it helped more so in like just automating some of those things, like not from like a personalization aspect, but more so like the data aspect. Like that's where I use AI most, is like, how can I figure out from a data aspect, like all the stuff that you would be doing with like a manual process. Like I use it for signal interpretation, a little bit of message construction, not as much anymore. Routing decisions is a big one. So like, again, like you can use it to score and route before they ever hit a human. Is this a marketing play? Is this a sales play? Also research at the account level is another good one for sure. I think when AI sits on top of like bad or shallow signals, it just produces confident noise faster. So like a well-written emails going to the wrong person at the wrong time is still the wrong move. The teams getting burned right now are the ones who bought AI outreach tools and skipped like the signal infrastructure entirely. So like volume went up, like, I don't know, maybe your team's happy volume went up, but conversion went down. They're going to blame the tool. They're going to think the tool's the issue. They're going to swap out the tool and they're going to probably see the same thing again.
Yeah. You have a nice post or case study you shared a little while ago in terms of when you're using the wrong metrics at the wrong stage of the ABM. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Because I think it's fascinating in the context of everything we're talking about, which is if you're using the wrong tools, measuring the wrong things, then you're probably doing the wrong things, and it just doesn't make sense. To share that kind of that case study with us, because it's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, so I think like if I think about like speed to outreach, for example, as like a part of this, like the data is really the problem. Like most intent platforms are delivering reasonably accurate signals. Like the breakdown is what happens between the signals and the action. So like process-wise, the failure is that intent data usually routes straight to an SDR queue with like no interpretation layer. No one asks, what does this signal mean for this specific account? What's our existing relationship? What's the right play here? It just becomes another row on a priority list. The SDR sends the same sequence that they send everyone else. But underneath, the process problem is a mindset problem. So go-to-market teams are measured on activity and speed. Calls made, email sent, meetings booked. So when a signal comes in, the instinct needs to act on it immediately because that's what the incentive structure rewards. Slowing down to interpret the signal and kind of like design the play the way that you should do it is falling behind until you look at the conversion rates and you realize that speed was never the advantage. And I think that's one of like the underlying thing. It's like, I don't know, people, I don't want to say they're comped on the wrong things because that's not the case, but like there has to be like with this whole agentic push and everything, like maybe we need to look at like the way people are comped nowadays. And like, again, if you're going down more of a like, let's do this the right way, like should the structure change?
It's the structure of like the outbound team, like the SDR.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what are you suggesting? What's the future look like if play it forward 12 months or 5 years?
Yeah. I mean, in 5 years, I don't know. People are saying like SDRs, BDRs will be gone. Like, I know there's a bunch of AI SDRs out there. I have a client, we're using an AI SDR right now, and I hate it. I'm the one that built the entire thing, and like, I can't get it to sound like a human, no matter how hard I try.
Yeah.
I tweak it, and like I could tell the open rates aren't great, the click-through rates aren't great. Like there's a better way, but like their thinking was like, hey, we can save on headcount by deploying this $900 a month SDR. But it doesn't matter if it doesn't work. Like it's yeah. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's less AEs. Like I'm not 100% sure. I just think that it will make more of hopefully the research piece of it easier for like sales teams. But but that's the only thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think again, back to your point that like people buy from people and relationships matter. So I think there's a bit of Kool-Aid circulating around AI SDRs, AI BDRs, AI AEs even. And Niall, I know you've been in a lot of enterprise, actually, obviously back to your Mondelez days. Do you see a future when it's AI salespeople selling to AI procurement people? Is that where we're heading?
So I think it's like, I think, you know, if we look at all the headlines at the moment, there's a lot of restructuring going on, a lot of companies across the globe, you know, there's a lot of it being attributed back to AI. There's a lot of it which is opportunistic. How do I shrink my company by 10% and, you know, improve the bottom line for investors, whether it is or is not the right long-term strategy for the team and, you know, for the customers. I've tried a lot of AI SDRs and AE solutions, some which have been kind of homegrown, some which are very polished. You know, everybody has touched Fin at some point. Now they've brought out the sales version of Fin. I think the reality is that, you know, you can achieve something which is an approximation of the functional effort that needs to be taken by AI SDR or AE. Some of them are amazing in their quality, the, you know, voice, the conversational style. You know, I think there's obviously a place for them. There's different industries that probably lend themselves. Nobody's going to argue when they've had a good automated experience. Like my background is customer service, so I started on the phones back in the 90s. And anything you could come up with, what is that? FAQs, dynamic IVR systems, you know, web solutions, anything that you could do to cut the wait times and call times and surface the right relevant information and drivers and hot fixes in front of the customer is a good thing. Anything where you're trying to shoehorn the customer into something which you know in advance they're not going to like just because it saves you money is a recipe for a disaster. And we've all seen with utility companies over the last number of years that it's a painful experience. You're waiting forever. Then you are given the alternative, the website and the bot was a terrible experience. But with the advent of platforms like Fin and a range of other solutions that have, you know, come out over the last, say, 12 months, that experience isn't bad. You know, you can have now a conversation, a voice conversation with a platform and be able to go and give your passwords and log in and solve your problem. And I don't think anybody complains about that. What they complain about is that it needs to be frictionless to get to a human as and when you need them. So if you're somebody who's less confident, you're older, you're not as au fait, or you don't want to ever touch a robot, you need to be given the option of the path to get straight to the human. If you're somebody who's happy to start with the, you know, robot and try and do a self-service, that has to be frictionless. It has to know all about you. It has to have the full history. It has to know all the different touch points. You've been in store, you've returned something, you went online, you purchased something. Because if it doesn't have the context, it's going to be a car crash, and it's going to be constantly asking the same questions over and over again. But the challenge is that if you lean in and you build yourself or you purchase the kind of, you know, the most sophisticated AI SDRs and AEs are available on the market, well, you're kind of swapping your human capital cost for a tokens cost. And that tokens cost is not small, because context at a high level and a very, you know, capable robot, if you're not buying it from a platform who's buying all those tokens in bulk like Intercom and Fin, and you're trying to build it yourself, it can be very expensive very quickly. And so then people are making, you know, trade-off calls about, well, you know, I'll go for a lesser model, but I'll get it to hit more people when it reaches out. And they don't care that, you know, that it's going to be a bad experience for lots of people if the unit economics work out. If it's cheap capital equals it's going to be easy. But now we have the interesting convergence of capital has dried up. and cheap investment and money from VCs has dried up. So people have to get more inventive and they have to be more efficient. And the unit economics of serving an agentic experience really matters, and you have to pay attention, and it's impacting your runway. So it'll be interesting to see over the next kind of 12, 24 months. Like, I don't think there's going to be any slowdown in the attempted adoption and use cases for AI outbound and inbound. But I think we're going to see that there's going to be a maturing of expectations on both sides of the fence. What's a consumer or a B2B buyer going to be willing to put up with? And the answer is very little. They've been trained on Apple devices and zero wait times for most services that they've encountered over the last 20 years in physical environment or online. So they have kind of zero tolerance for anything which is going to take time or is given a poor experience. And as many people have said in the past, the best way to vote is by canceling your subscription. So by not making the purchase, not renewing, you're sending a very clear, strong signal. You don't have to get out and pick it on the streets that this is something which is not working for you. So I think the only thing that's going to drive change is people realizing that that kind of spray and pray approach, that cold email approach, just doesn't work. And I think everybody's screaming that back, towards the vendors, and we're even looking at ourselves because we're all guilty. We've done it. We've done it in the last quarter of trying to use that kind of spray and pray approach just to kind of get the pipeline going. But it seldom works. We're all trying to figure out what's going to work in this new world. There's lots of exciting case studies, but I don't think anybody has nailed it just yet. I think on the support side, Intercom and Finn have kind of nailed pay per resolution. It'll be interesting to see if they can bring the same mechanic over to kind of a price per outcome, price per percent for success in the sales world. And it's early days, so we'll find out.
Thank you, Niall. We're coming up on time, and so our closing tradition, even though this is our first time doing Intent Decoded, I'm going to ask you both to just leave us with one piece of advice. So for the audience of people who are in the topic of purchase intent and thinking about it, I'll give you my takeaway from listening to you both. So thank you very much. Is just like we're out of the volume game at the moment, and if you have intent data, to your point, Nick, it should be about using it to narrow rather than trying to build kind of broader kind of lists. So that's my piece of advice to people from listening to you both. Nick, Niall, I let you go and give us your one piece of advice that you'd share with people as we sign off.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of parallels with what happened with e-commerce over the last 20 years or so. So, getting a listing up on a website, whether it's your own website or a marketplace like Amazon, is the easy part. But then that standing on its own 2 feet and managing to convert somebody over to make a purchase is the hard part. And so if we think of things like the imagery and the key selling points and the descriptions, all of those things have to be, as Amazon would say, A+ quality in order to kind of convert somebody. And if you've got a lot of competition going on, then you're going to have to lean in harder on better imagery, better descriptions, and that forcing function means you're going to be better at targeting the people you're driving to that property, whether it's your own property or indirectly through somebody else's property. Same thing has to happen here. The foundation of e-commerce is master data. So if, bad data in means bad outcomes are going to happen as a result of that data. So I think people looking back on their system of record, whether that's a CRM or any other marketing automation tool, and saying, a lot of the rich data that we need is definitely sitting within this system, but we've struggled to extract the right signal at the right time in order to have, is there intent? Are they a good target? And then what's the context of the outreach, which isn't one size fits all. That's where AI has a massive opportunity to take the thousands of accounts and leads that are already sitting within your system and revisiting them, and then from a timing perspective and a context perspective and an intent perspective, make the investments that you're already making a lot more efficient and effective. So I think if people just ignore all the hype and the noise that's happening at the moment, just go back to basics and unit economics and all that unsexy stuff, I think just applying that baseline of saying, well, how do we make the underlying data better? Because if we make the underlying data better, that is ultimately going to lead to a better decision, action, insight, outcome, whether that's been activated by a human or a system.
Perfect. Thank you, Niall. And Nick? Over to the last word to you.
I would say stop using intent data to decide when to reach out. Start using it to decide what changed and whether you have something worth saying because of it. If you can't answer what changed in that account and why it matters to them right now, the signal's not a reason not to act. So it's a reason to watch. The outreach comes when you have something relevant to say, not just because the platform told you the account's hot.
Amazing. Thank you, Nick. And thank you, Niall. Very useful, informative. I've really enjoyed that conversation. Thanks, guys. And I hope everyone watching really enjoyed as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Really appreciated the chat.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks, Brendan.
Thank you.